Hey, it's Quadex. The 1 hour specials will be coming out tomorrow. The new series will be starting today. Go follow my Instagram when we hit 300 followers. I'll upload another 1 hour special for every main series that I do. And roll the intro. Okay, I've heard there's some special content in this chapter. I'll deal with that when it comes. I don't know what I'm doing with it yet. Let's get into it. As Naruto stared at the number of dango sticks in front of him, he couldn't help but feel a sense of nostalgia. Back when he was still being trained by Anko sensei, he had noticed her obsession, more like an addiction to dango. She was never seen by him without dango, or a dango stick dangling between her teeth. Whenever she was in a good mood, she would always treat him to dango. It was always a very touching gesture for him, so he didn't have the heart to tell her that he preferred Ichiraku ramen. They had been on the dango stand for over 2 hours now, and Naruto had told her everything that had happened to him ever since he became a student of Kakashi. He was careful to leave sensitive parts out, such as the massacre on the bridge or that he knew the famous jutsu of the yonde. Anko whistled when he was finished. Wow, you sure haven't been bored after you became a team member, have you? Naruto shrugged. Not if you count doing a D rank mission as exciting. I'll pick a C rank or training over them any day. He ruthlessly pushed away the memories of repeatedly catching Tora. He would try his utmost to become a chunin, if only to escape from doing that mission again. Anko hummed, not saying anything else. She avoided any topic that was related to Orochimaru. Naruto took a deep breath and exhaled, slowly getting up. Well, it was nice catching up with you, sensei, but I gotta rest for tomorrow. I would want to be fully rested for the exam of which you are the proctor of, he said, tweaking between his teeth with the dango stick. Anko also got up, grinning savagely. Damn straight. I better not see you losing in this phase. You got that, Naruto? Naruto smiled wide-eyed and gave a thumbs up. Loud and clear. Anko turned to leave, but seemed to remember something and turned around. Oh, almost forgot to tell you. Come to training ground 44 tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Naruto tilted his head. Wouldn't this be considered cheating on my part to receive information from the proctor, sensei? Anko smiled and shook her head. This is the information your team sensei would be telling you. I'm just saving you the trouble of finding your team or Kakashi. All the best, kid. She vanished in a swirl of leaves. Naruto nodded to himself and turned around, heading towards Ichiraku. He felt quite good today in the exam, so celebration was required. Dango was good and all, but it wasn't dinner. Inside his mind, Kurama scoffed, muttering about pathetic excuse to eat unhealthy food. As Naruto neared the ramen stand, he saw something that caused his heart to skip a beat. Temari was roaming on the street, apparently taking the sights. The best fact was that she was on her own. None of her brothers were with her, not even Gaara. He didn't know why, but suddenly his palms started to feel sweaty and his heartbeat seemed to increase. This was his perfect chance of spending some time with her. Go for it, brat, Kurama's voice encouraged him. Wow, he and him were on the same page. His steps automatically began to take him in her direction. Every step felt like he was going too slow, but at the same time he was going too fast. He had no idea on how to approach her or what to say, but at the same time he wanted her to spend time with him, to enjoy spending time with him. Oi, Naruto, you will not stutter in front of a mere girl. You're my Jinchuriki and you won't embarrass me. Naruto wanted to tell him that she didn't even know that he was in Jinchuriki, and how the hell did the fact relate to what he was about to do? He barely kept himself from voicing his thoughts to the fox inside him, forgetting that Kurama could easily read his thoughts. Kurama scoffed and refrained from speaking. He will see how Naruto handles this without making himself look like a fool. It happened so quickly, but he was standing behind her. She seemed to be unaware that he was standing directly behind her. Stealing up and swallowing up his nervousness, he tapped her shoulder. Temari finally relaxed after exiting the hotel where she and her brothers were staying. She had known that after their training, she was going to get bored because she had nothing to do. After almost half an hour of arguing, she was able to convince Kankuro to let her leave the hotel. Gaara really didn't care much about what she did, and that was one thing she was grateful for. Baki didn't protest much when she told him that she would be able to scout the important locations in this village. So here she was, wandering the streets and taking in the sights. She had to admit, Konoha was beautiful. All the greenery in the village made it seem like the village actually pulsed with life. The weather here was very pleasant as well, though that could be attributed to the greenery. As she aimlessly wandered, her thoughts turned to the attractive blonde from before. Uzumaki Naruto. She tested the word on her lips, her mouth unconsciously turning into a smile. He was certainly attractive, more so than any boy she had seen of her age. He was also quite fearless and charismatic as well, if what he did when the 10th question was asked is anything to go by. That certainly earned him points in her book. She didn't know if he realized it or not, but he had erased all traces of doubts the immediate examiner had put into them, including her. Something inside her told her that he knew. Her hormones seemed to make their presence known. As she began to imagine what he looked like without his shirt and jacket on. Her cheeks burned as she realized what she was thinking and rapidly shook her head to clear off any more thoughts like those. Why am I thinking such things? I don't even know him. Then her thoughts did a complete 180 once more. Although, I wouldn't mind to get to know him. A day or two, she flushed again. Though this time, she had a smile and didn't try to shake it off. So lost in her thoughts she was that she startled a bit when her shoulder was tapped. Mentally cursing herself for getting caught off guard, she turned to see who had tapped her and got frozen in place when she saw the subject of her thoughts right in front of her. Naruto became a bit confused when Temari turned around and suddenly froze. Guess she wasn't expecting to meet me? He thought before waving a hand in front of her eyes. Temari-san, are you alright? His voice snapped her back into the present. She saw him looking at her, a curious expression on his face. Regaining control of herself, she smiled and greeted back. I'm alright, Uzumaki-san. I just wasn't expecting to see you here. She giggled a bit at the sour look that he made. Please don't call me that. Naruto will just do fine. She returned an easy smile. Then you call me Temari. Being called like that by someone of my age makes me feel old. Naruto didn't know how he was speaking without thinking. That just won't do now, will it? I wouldn't want to make a pretty lady such as yourself feel old, he returned her easy smile. Temari felt her face go warm at his response. Not wanting to be looking embarrassed, she folded her arms and turned her face away, a smile tugging at her lips. Flatter, she scoffed softly. Naruto internally grinned. This wasn't hard at all. He didn't have to pretend to be someone he wasn't. He would be thinking up on what to say if he was. The lines and responses just instinctively came to him. Temari changed the topic. So what are you doing here, Naruto? Naruto put his hands in his jacket's pockets. I'm actually on my way to have dinner after talking with my sensei. He then asked a bit hesitantly, would you like to join me? Temari barely kept from choking on air. Hey, I do that. No, I didn't. Wait. No, I did it on water. Alright? I'm superior. But couldn't prevent her eyes from going wide. What? Naruto then discovered that repeating his question was exponentially harder, but he managed it without stuttering. I said, would you like to join me for dinner? The smile on his face would have seemed natural to anyone if it wasn't for a drop of sweat rolling down the side of his face. Temari forced her stopped mind to kickstart. She could not believe it. Just a short while ago, she was thinking about going on a date with Naruto, and not even 10 minutes later, he was asking her out. She regained her wits and asked, stuttering, "Are you asking me out on a date?" Oh, and her beet red face wasn't helping her at all. She was hoping, though, that the answer would be yes. She might get to know him a bit better. Naruto himself felt his face go warm a bit, but he just rolled with it. Shrugging what he dearly hoped was a natural manner, he said with a smooth smile, "If you want it to be, sure, let's go with that." Temari, seeing Naruto relax, forced herself to relax as well. Crossing her arms, she smirked. "So, where are you taking me, Naruto?" Naruto smirked in return. "You haven't been to Ichiraku Ramen, have you?" 5 minutes later, they were walking in the direction. Naruto was quickly discovering the awkwardness of the silence between them. To make it go away, he picked a topic that both of them could easily converse about without giving away their secrets. "So, what's the Shinobi Academy in Suna like?" And so the silence was broken and conversation picked up from here. Temari was glad to find out how easy it was to converse with Naruto. His seemingly bored, indifferent attitude in her eyes was perfectly suiting for him. His tone was very friendly, and to her pleasant surprise, she found herself enjoying just talking to him. "And we arrived," Naruto announced. Temari looked up to see a small, unassuming ramen shop. It was more of a bar than a shop. "Quite simplistic this place is," she commented. Naruto smirked and turned to her. "Don't knock it until you've tried it." "Yo, Toichi-o-san." A middle-aged man turned around, smiling when he saw his favorite customer. "Naruto!" Temari guessed that Naruto had to be very familiar with him to call him that. The man named Toichi then spotted Temari standing beside Naruto and his smile widened. "Oh, and who is this lady friend of yours? A girlfriend on a date?" Toichi suppressed his chuckles as both the children turned red. The girl more than Naruto. Naruto opened his mouth to speak when Ayami came out of the back, wiping her hand. "Naruto-kun, who are you?" "And who's the girl beside you?" she asked, a bit bewildered. Naruto smiled, his blush slowly disappearing. "This is Sabaku no Temari. She's a genin from Suna, here to take part in the Chunin exams. As to answer your question, Osan, she's not my girlfriend, but we're definitely on a date," he said the last part while turning to Temari and winking, making the sandy blonde redder than she already was, and cursed Naruto in her head for being so charming. Toichi finally let out his chuckles while Ayami happily sighed. Toichi asked Naruto, "And you brought your first date to my stand. I'm really honored, Naruto." Naruto shook his head as he motioned for Temari to take a seat. He sat beside her and grinned. "Why wouldn't I? Your ramen's awesome." Turning to Temari, he smiled. "What will you have, Temari?" Temari frowned a bit in thought and answered after a moment. "I'll have a shio ramen, please." Naruto turned and simply said, "I'll have my usual, Osan." While the ramen was being prepared, he discreetly checked Temari out of the corner of his eye. Her posture was full of confidence, and from what he could see, there wasn't a single speck of a fangirl in her. She was indeed a serious kunoichi. Glancing at her legs, he noted with appreciation the toned, smooth calf muscle underneath the fishnet. His gaze then snapped upwards to a place that occupies the minds of all teenage boys. Her chest was actually quite developed for her age, if only her top was a bit lower. Temari was steadily turning redder and redder as she spotted Naruto checking her out. She did not miss the appreciation in his eyes as he checked out her legs and chest. Her embarrassment finally toppled off the edge, and she turned to him with a red face and a furious eyes. "What are you doing?" She expected him to blush and splutter and fruitlessly try to excuse himself. To her surprise, he did not even blush a little bit. Instead, he smirked and returned a question of his own. "What do you think I'm doing?" Their orders arrived, and as Naruto broke his chopstick, he answered his own question. "I'm checking you out, in both the ways." Temari's embarrassment turned to confusion at his blunt answer. Taking a bite of her own ramen, she barely refrained from gasping in pleasure. It was delicious. Hey, yo. On that food war shit. As if the food was from heaven itself. Suna had nothing so tasty as this. She heard a chuckle and she opened her eyes to find Naruto staring at her with amusement. Turning a bit red, she scowled and asked, "What's so funny?" His reply was quick. The reaction of everyone who tries the ramen of this stall for the very first time. He chuckled as she swiped out his arm for embarrassing her. She then addressed his previous statement. What did you mean when you were checking me out in both ways? Naruto sneaked a glance in front of him and sighed expectantly at seeing Ayami and Tuichi trying to eavesdrop not so subtly. He loudly cleared his throat, causing the two to turn away and return to their work, whistling innocently. He then turned to Temari, who had a faint look of amusement on her face. Well, the first point of view is that of a shinobi. You're my competitor, which makes it my duty as a shinobi to gather as much information I can about you, he explained, getting a smirk from her. Oh? And what have you learned? Naruto gulped down the last of his ramen and said, well, the only thing that I've come up with is that you have wind release, indicated by the large fan on your back, which you likely use to augment your jutsu. The size of your fan is also an indicator of your preferred type of jutsu. You like to use futon on a large scale to overwhelm your opponents. He then thought for a bit and then added, the size of your fan is an indicator of another thing. That thing is not easy to carry by any means, so your body has to be physically very strong, especially your upper body, considering the strength required to swing it at a force to generate torrents of wind. Temari was getting bowled over at how spot on his observations were. She didn't even know it was possible for a complete stranger to learn the full set of anyone's abilities with just one glance. One thing was for sure, Naruto was extremely intelligent and observant. She didn't even know any of her age who had analytic skills of this caliber. Naruto was turning out to be a very dangerous opponent, now that she thought about it. Finishing his soup, he smacked his lips and turned to face her, the smile never leaving his face. Of course, to everyone it's blatantly obvious that you prefer using your fan than taijutsu or genjutsu, but you must have a good grasp of taijutsu if not genjutsu, considering the fact that the children of cages have a certain standard to live up to. I'm totally guessing this, but you really don't seem the type to use genjutsu. Temari was at a loss of words. No genin should have analytic skills like the ones Naruto was displaying. Everything he had stated until now was fully true. Something in the last statement caused her to ask a question, but her voice held awe. Wait, you mean everything you've just said was based on pure observation, except for the last statement? Naruto rested his elbow on the counter and smirked, nodding. Observation and conclusion that I can derive from these observations. Of course, to derive these conclusions, I have to know my facts so I can suit my theories to them. Temari looked at her empty bowl, muttering so low that Naruto almost didn't catch it. You're really good at that. Naruto grinned. I better be. I've been practicing that for a while now. And what's the second view? Naruto's tone turned purely innocent. Oh, you know how boys check out hot girls. That earned him a swipe to his shoulder, but there was no heat behind it and the twitching corner of her mouth gave her away. Paying for both of them despite Temari's protest, he bid the father and daughter goodnight and they both left. I have to say, this date wasn't half bad, she smirked while walking alongside him. He was escorting her back to her hotel. She had to admit, it was incredibly cute of him. Naruto nodded, putting his hand in his pocket. I have to agree on that. For a date in the middle of a Chunin exams, it wasn't bad at all. They talked a bit more, and when they finally reached her hotel, Temari turned to Naruto and smiled genially. Thank you for the date, Naruto. It was really fun, not to mention the great food. Much to her surprise, Naruto actually looked embarrassed at the praise. He rubbed the back of his head with a sheepish look. Aw, you're embarrassing me. Then he smiled back at her. Seriously though, I too had fun going on a date with you. An awkward silence descended upon them again as neither knew how to properly say goodbye. Chuck it, Naruto decided, in move that surprised Temari. He leant forwards and pressed a light peck to her cheek, just near the corner of her mouth. Good night, he muttered before vanishing. He did it so fast that it did not even register to Temari when he left, and how he had left. She just kept staring off into space, a blank look on her face. When she did recover, a massive blush appeared on her face as she smiled and rubbed the corner of her mouth where he had kissed her. She wanted to be angry that he had kissed her without her consent, but it was a very sweet gesture and not to mention the perfect end to their date. He is bold, that's for sure, she thought before going up to her room, a happy and dreamy smile on her face. she wouldn't mind another date with him. That's where I'm gonna end it, guys. I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next part. I am so glad we didn't reach the special parts yet. Bye.
Wanted a bitch who was on the move, but you on a goddamn late. Got that one in my bed and she just wanna sleep. Fucking up all of the sheets. She only wake up to eat. Do this shit every week. Like why you do that? Crying you wanna be great, but sleeping until the next day. Why you do that? Got that much in the bank. We go out, she order the steak. Why you do that?